You're now watching Sports Bettor's Paradise on the BetRivers Network.
Jimmy out here with Paul Stone as we talk a little college football. Paul's best bets of winning week last week for Paul. Heating up, coming down the stretch, just as he did last year. So let's get right to it. And a little bedlam last time for the foreseeable future. Oklahoma State and Oklahoma. Oklahoma State, 4 straight sort of 50-50 games. You know, spreads under a touchdown, 3 of them as a dog. And, well, we know that Mike Gundy has been very vocal about Oklahoma leaving for the conference and not doing Bedlam. Not like they can go to the SEC and still play. That's a conversation for another day. But Mike Gundy has spent a little time in Oklahoma State as a player 4 years, as an assistant in 2 different stints, 10 years, and now in his 19th year. After a losing year his first year, one of my favorite stats, 17 straight winning seasons. That's including bowls now, but winning seasons. No 500s, no losing records. And, man, he looks like he's on his way again. He's got his team improving after really getting gutted in the transfer portal. Gutted enough to where his 40-plus game starter transferred out to sit on the bench. Oklahoma State here at Bedlam, again, one of the last Bedlams for a while, +6 against Oklahoma, hanging their head a little bit after losing in Lawrence.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I'll open it up by I still am scratching my head about Spencer Sanders transferring to Ole Miss to watch SEC football, I guess, for a year. But, you know, Mike Gundy, whether you like him or love him or loathe him or whatever, the guy, he certainly is a polarizing figure, but he's certainly a great college football coach. I mean, he's one of these guys that I like to say gets more out of less. You know, he recruits against Texas and Texas A&M and in-state Oklahoma for players. He certainly gets some good players. They've had some top players in that program, but he builds that program on guys who, maybe didn't have the options of the schools I just mentioned, and he just does a tremendous job. You look at Oklahoma State's season to this point, to me it's kind of a tale of 2 seasons. You have the 4 games they played before their bye the last Saturday in September, and then you have the 4 games that they played in the month of October. First of all, the bad and the ugly, you know, their month of September was not a good start. I mean, I think it's what a lot of us expected to see out of Oklahoma. They kind of bottomed out in week 3 when they lose to Sun Belt member South Alabama 33-7 there in Stillwater. They followed that by losing their season opener at Iowa State. And then they get that early season bye, the final Saturday in September. That's about the time they started going heavily to Ollie Gordon II, the running back from Euless Trinity High School out of Fort Worth. And they've been a different team ever since. They not only won all 4 of their games in the month of October, they also covered all 4 of those games, 3 of those victories coming as the betting underdog. And Ollie Gordon Jr., I mean, he has been one of the stories of college football, especially in the last few weeks. Last 2 games, he's rushed for 553 yards. The last 5 games, he's almost averaged 200 yards a game. He's rushed for a total of 978 yards in the last 5. So they're running that football, and they'll be doing that, I'm sure, on Saturday at Boone Pickens Stadium there in Stillwater. In Boone Pickens Stadium, to me, one of the most underrated venues in college football. Those students are right on top of the visitors' bench. They pound those paddles on the side of the stadium the whole game, makes a bunch of racket. It's a crazy environment. And as you mentioned, this is the final edition of Bedlam, at least for the time being, at least for the foreseeable future. Oklahoma State, I think, is going to be really pumped and primed for this one. Oklahoma doesn't really come in on its best foot, not only losing at Kansas last week, losing to Kansas for the first time since 1997. But their last 3 games, I mean, they beat Texas, but they were +3 in the turnover battle. They outcame a 2-point conversion against UCF from going to overtime, and then they actually lose at Kansas last week. So they're just 2 or 3 plays away from being on a 3-game losing streak. That is a little bit of a stretch, but their games have been tight. Their playoff hopes certainly are not what they were this time last week. Oklahoma State, really nasty as a home underdog there at Boone Pickens, 9-4 against the spread since 2013. Take Oklahoma State plus the 6 over the Sooners Saturday in Stillwater.
Going to be a lot of juice in that stadium there. Let's keep this theme going where the sort of mid-level teams in the Big 12 with quality coaches. Some people criticize Matt Campbell. Look, do a little history lesson whenever you criticize Matt Campbell. See how Iowa State has done historically. It is a tough place to win. It is one of the lower resource programs, but he's kind of got his team playing better in the middle of the season, kind of like Gundy at Oklahoma State. Iowa State now has a little winning streak going themselves. Field rush fade. Kansas, there you go. They rushed the field. Look how much juice did they leave on that field in that win, historic win against Oklahoma. I mean, that was pretty fun. I mean, carrying the poles out, the whole shebang. We're looking at the Cyclones here at home, -2.5, Paul.
Yeah, I mean, this is the time of the year, and I think we've talked about it on this podcast, where teams, in my mind, start kind of running out of juice, and they have high points and low points. Late October, early November, we see some crazy results. They've been practicing since around August 1st. They're just not going to have the same level of collective team psyche week in and week out. And Kansas is in such a difficult spot, not only physically, but even more so mentally. I mean, you mentioned it. They beat Oklahoma for the first time since 1997. They expend so much emotional and physical energy in that victory. The fans rush the field. They tear the goalposts down. They take them outside the stadium. They dump them in Potter Lake. I just don't know that that's a good setup for this travel now to Ames, Iowa, to face a team that's really playing good football. You know, it's a team that obviously has endured some difficulties this year. They had the early season scandal. They've steadied the ship. And surprisingly, they're in a 5-way tie for first place in the Big 12 at 4-1. They've won 3 straight conference games, all by double digits. The redshirt freshman quarterback, Rocco Beck, really performing efficiently. Maybe not, he's not in the Heisman Trophy conversation or anything like that, but he's getting the job done. And it's a relatively small sample size. But when I look at Kansas's road performance this year, they're really not the same team away from Lawrence, it doesn't appear. They lost at both Texas and Oklahoma State. No shame in that. But against Nevada early in the season, they only beat Nevada 31-24. Jalen Daniels actually played in that game. That game was tied at 24 with 10 minutes to go. So I don't think they're quite the same team away from Lawrence, Kansas. I like Iowa State to win this game by at least a field goal, probably more. Iowa State -2.5 over Kansas.
Get extra value this football season with BetRivers Squares. Went up to $10,000 in bonus money. Bet $10 in same-game parlays on any game with the Squares icon to earn a square. Brought to you by our friends over at BetRivers. Stay in the theme. Stay in the Big 12. Again, another good coach. Got his team on the improve. Wasn't quite hitting on all cylinders early, especially that trip on Friday night to Stillwater where Howard threw 3 interceptions, and they lost that game as the betting favorite. Now they travel to Texas, kind of corrected some things, cleaned some things up, and they're kind of getting in their groove a little bit now. Texas with the backup quarterback, okay, they just outmanned, BYU. Texas is 4.5 in Austin against Kansas State.
Yeah, I mean, Kansas State, you look at that quarterback situation, Will Howard feels a little heat. He sees Avery Johnson, the true freshman, a big-time recruit, kind of closing in on him, and Will Howard has upped his game. So they have a really nice situation there at the quarterback position, does Kansas State, going into the final 4 or so games of the regular season. Looking at Texas, I mean, if a person didn't watch last Saturday's BYU-Texas game and just scan the box score, the 35-6 win over BYU, doesn't really cause reason for pause. But if you watch the game, if you saw Malik Murphy's performance, it wasn't just a horrible first performance. I mean, the guy has not played any significant college football, but I still have concerns about him. Like a lot of first-time quarterbacks, taking care of the football is going to be a big issue. He made some bad decisions in the throwing game. He threw 1 interception. He lost 1 fumble. So, the ball handling issues are certainly something to keep an eye on as they play Kansas State in Austin on Saturday. I think he's going to be more comfortable in his second start against Kansas State, but Kansas State's a better football team than BYU. So he's going to need to be better. Kansas State, as I mentioned, they've started to really hit their stride with the 2 quarterback situation. set up there of Will Howard and Avery Johnson really getting it done. They've won their last 3 games, have the Wildcats over Texas Tech, TCU, and Houston by an average of 32 points. So they're really rolling. And in those 3 victories, I think very significant, they haven't committed a single turnover. So with the way Malik Murphy being an inexperienced quarterback, ball handling issues, Kansas State really protecting the football. I think Kansas State, although it's difficult to handicap turnovers, I think they have a higher probability of winning the turnover battle in Austin on Saturday than do the Longhorns. So I like that. I like that advantage there. And Texas, frankly, obviously going to be without Quinn Ewers for the second straight week. Seems like they kind of maybe peaked with that week 2 victory, a very impressive victory at Alabama. They need to kind of catch their second wind here. They've had trouble defending running quarterbacks in the past. They've got 2 of them to defend on Saturday, and Will Howard and Avery Johnson. I like Kansas State plus 4.5 over Texas.
All right. Paul Stone going theme again with us. Remember those Pac-12 home dogs last week? 3 of them? Well, we got 3 quality coaches, their teams in form as of late with Oklahoma State, Iowa State, and Kansas State. Bama and LSU, kind of respected money coming in on Alabama. We saw some look-ahead lines as about 5 to 7 range. Opened up 5 most places, 5.5 or 6 occasional there. It's been bet down to 3. That's where it is right now, pretty much everywhere, including at BetRivers. Should be a shootout. LSU, number 1 total offense, number 1 yards per play. Jaden Daniels having the best year out of any quarterback anywhere. Defense, though, different story. Triple digits yards per play in the triple digits, and also down 3 more DBs for this game, and an interior lineman as well. Jalen Milroe, look, yards per attempt, number 2 in the country with all of these great quarterbacks, and he's been criticized, and he's having to get it. But number 2 in yards per attempt in the country, Bama -3, prime time again for this matchup.
I think obviously they played the other 2 quarterbacks early in the season against South Florida and then gave the job back to Jalen Milroe. And since then, I think they've really done an excellent job of just protecting him and throwing the ball in spots. And they're obviously not throwing the ball a whole lot, but they're being very effective when they do throw the ball. He hasn't committed the turnovers that he did earlier, and he's really shown great improvement, has Jalen Milroe. I look at this game. First of all, Alabama opened as a 6-point favorite, as you mentioned, on Sunday morning there at Circa over LSU. It's right where I had the number. I had it kind of went back and forth between 5.5 and 6. But since that game opened Sunday, it's kind of been a one-way avalanche of money being bet on the Bayou Bengals, it seems. This line would suggest that the game would be pick on a neutral field. And while I absolutely love Jaden Daniels, all those offensive weapons, you mentioned the statistics, one of the top 2 or 3 offenses in the nation, without question, I just don't see this game being a pick on a neutral site. The Tigers are just too vulnerable on defense, and you mentioned the specific vulnerabilities in the back of the defense, which wasn't a strength of the team beginning the season, certainly not the DBU that we've become accustomed there in Baton Rouge, and it's really been a challenge for LSU to defend passing teams. They give up 8 yards per pass attempt, 250 yards a game passing. They rank just inside the top 100 in both those categories. You look at the 3 ranked opponents that LSU has faced this year, Florida State, Ole Miss, and Missouri. Those 3 teams have averaged 46.3 points, 576 yards a game against LSU. Alabama, not nearly as prolific on offense as those 3, but I think you get the picture. Again, LSU, certainly one of the nation's top 2 or 3 offenses, 44 points a game, 543 yards per game. But Alabama will be the toughest defense that LSU has faced to date. Alabama also, I believe, has the advantage of having lost to LSU last year in Baton Rouge on the 2-point conversion pass from Daniels to Mason Taylor. So I think that touch of extra motivation is in the Tide's corner. Just in summation, Alabama's still Alabama. They're playing with revenge. They're playing at night. And I think Alabama at -3 is a little bit cheap. Take the Tide over the Tigers Saturday night in Tuscaloosa.
Rare spot where you get Nick Saban 3 or less at home as a favorite. Even that great 2019 LSU team. Bama went off a 5-point favorite in that 2019 game. Final pick 5 for us this week for Paul Stone. Going to a total, going out to the Pac-12. UCLA 2.5 and 52.5 at Arizona. Arizona does it again. Nice win against Oregon State at home on Saturday night. The total is what you're looking at, 52.5, Paul.
I'll tell you what a great conference the Pac-12 is. It's just a shame that it's going to go away for all practical purposes. But this game, you look at the handicap of this total, first of all, I don't think anyone could have projected that during their preseason preparation that UCLA was going to have one of the very best defenses in all of college football. But in my mind, that's what the numbers tell you. They rank highly, do the Bruins in a number of key defensive statistical categories. In scoring defense, they're 10th at just 16.1 points per game. In rushing defense, they're second, only allowing 59 yards per game rushing, and they only allow 6.2 yards per pass attempt. So they're good in all areas, all facets of defense. And on offense, you look at their 5 games against Power 5 opponents this year, they've scored 28 points or fewer in 4 of those 5 games. So it's not like they're an offensive juggernaut, certainly not anything like they were last year with DTR and more offensive weapons at their disposal. You look at this league again, the Pac-12, it has a reputation of being a high-scoring league, but both of these teams, they have been under machines to date in 2023. UCLA 6-1 to the under versus FBS opponents. Arizona 7-1 to the under on the season. I made this total 48. I think this game stays in the 40s. I like the game to remain under 52.5 on Saturday.
All right, 5 for you this week on Paul Stone. Looking for another week, looking for a repeat of a good stretch down the season to close out the college football season. For Paul Stone, I'm Jimmy out here in the Sports Bettor's Paradise each and every week on the BetRivers Network.